Andor, the show, not only made Rogue One, a movie that I didn't really like, better for me, but I think that it also uplifts the original trilogy, which we both love. But now when I get to the end, when I get to the destruction of Death Star 2 and the Battle of Endor, I will be thinking about what was sacrificed along the way, and having the weight of Andor in that moment will make that victory so much more meaningful. Welcome, everyone, to Krypton to Alderaan. I'm Joey, your Star Wars lover, and with me is Royish Goodlooks, your Star Wars song guy.
Hello, Joey. Hello, podcast.
Hello.
Hello.
And we're the podcast that analyzes nerdy pop culture, but it's mostly Star Wars. And on this episode, we're going to take a look back. We're going to go way, way back to 2016. We've just come out of the theater for Rogue One, except that we have Andor behind us now. So we could be comparing how we felt back then to how we feel now, having just watched Rogue One. And hey, first of all, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, so you could stick around and see what we do next. B, get in the comments and let us know what you think. How has Andor changed how you watch, how you feel about Rogue One, if it has at all? Let us know. Continue the conversation down in the comments, and we'll see you down there. But let's us have the conversation up here, out of the comments. I want to know, how did you feel about Rogue One when it first came out? And has that changed at all for you now with Andor's context?
Yeah. Dude, coming off of Force Awakens, and I know some of this we've probably said in the past if you've been following the pod for a long time, but we've never formally talked about Rogue One. So this is I'm glad that we're doing this today. Man, I was so excited after Force Awakens, and you're like, great, we're getting Rogue One. How are they stealing the Death Star plans? I'm not stoked that this is going to overwrite Dark Forces, my favorite Star Wars 90s video game. But I remember thinking, this could be the best Star Wars because there's never been anything like this. There's never been a non-trilogy thing. Who knows, right? Being very optimistic for that. The first time I saw Rogue One in theaters, I absolutely loved it. I walked out being like, whoa, this is insane. I watched it again the very next day and had a completely different reaction to it.
Wow.
And I still loved parts of it, but I saw some things that I didn't see the first time around with the excitement kind of worn off, being like, okay, now I'm putting on my analytical podcaster hat and looking for all my hot takes of continuity is off here or whatever, whatever you're going to point out, But over the last, so 2016, right? So not quite 10 years. My relationship hasn't really changed with it. It's been roughly solid with me, as I think it has been for a lot of people. But now, having seen Andor seasons 1 and 2, leading into Rogue One, which I watched Rogue One right after the season finale of Andor. Actually only watched the first scene. I needed to see how he met up with Tivik. How does this move into each other? But I ended up watching it once and then again yesterday. So I've rewatched it twice in this past kind of week or two to refresh for the pod. There's a lot of things I love about it. I love the X-Wing porn, for lack of better term. It's such good classic iconography in Rogue One. Man, the way that Andor butts right up to it and the way that it butts right up to A New Hope, it's such a special property. And I can see why a lot of people love it because it is so different from the rest of Star Wars. Back to my initial point, I don't know if it's the best Star Wars ever, but it is certainly some of the most unique Star Wars, and I think we have a lot of unique Star Wars. It fits in a category of its own, and that's where I'll set the stage today, and we can get into more specific hot takes in just a moment here.
Joey enters the stage.
Yeah, so what was your initial reaction, and how is it roughly changing so far?
This was a lot of fun. This was a lot of fun to think about. My initial reaction to Rogue One way back when was very different than your initial reaction. I did not really like Rogue One all that much. I'm sorry.
Even
to
after
say
the first time you saw it, there was no
the first time I saw it. There was stuff I was like, oh, that's cool. I didn't walk away being like, this is the worst thing I've ever seen. I walked away being like, I get it, but it's not really for me. There was a lot of stuff that influenced that. Rogue One is actually one of the things that I point to where my knowledge of canon and my expectations kind of got in the way of my enjoyment of the thing. And it took me a long time to get over that. It took me a long time to check myself on that. It was probably when we started doing the podcast and I started thinking more critically and generously about this stuff that I started giving Rogue One some flowers. But there was a lot wrapped up in it that I didn't really like. And of course, we had the knowledge of the production issues, which I think also impacted it feeling a bit off for me, just the film as a whole. So was not my favorite Star Wars, but I left the theater. It was almost like everyone in the world's favorite Star Wars. So in that moment, I was kind of like, yeah, cool. I'm glad that the thing that it did is, like you said, it was different. It didn't fit in what we thought Star Wars was on the screen. Because of that, it brought a lot of new people in, which is great. And it's what Star Wars needed to do and still needs to do. And I think Andor did that as well. And it was beautiful. It was just great to look at. There was a lot of like, oh, what happened to this that was in the trailer? What happened to this that was in the trailer?
If we could listen to our review, this hypothetical, if we started the podcast 5 or 6 years earlier, our review would have been fun to look at that time capsule.
Yep. I've said on this podcast before that the two movies that I flip-flop the most is Rogue One and Rise of Skywalker. Neither of them are my favorite, but when I factor in what they've done for Star Wars and what other people love about them, you know, I watch them with different levels of rose-colored glasses. That all being said, Andor changes everything about it for the better. Another thing we talk about on this podcast a lot is filling in the somehow and the importance of filling in the somehow and how that's what Star Wars makes the thing. And then either that same creator or someone else goes back in time and makes the thing that leads up to the thing and fills in the gaps. And Andor did that so much so that they just went from one thing right into the other. I think this is the first time we get to like talk about this in kind of real time. We talk about the Bad Batch and Mando filling in the somehow of how Palpatine returned. But this, we've had like Andor season 1, Andor season 2, right into Rogue One. And I think that's very special and makes it feel very different. The main thing about Rogue One for me was that I never ever connected with any of the characters. That is what disconnected me from the movie itself. There were moments that were funny because of the characters. There were moments that were sad because of the characters. But even with Saw Gerrera, who I had a history with from other content, I just did not connect with the characters at all. And Andor changed that, right? Like, that's the big thing for me. It's hard for me to go through a movie with zero connection to the characters. Did you connect with any of the characters in Rogue One when you first saw it?
Yeah, that wouldn't have been a note I took today, but you mentioning that in retrospect, yeah, that makes a lot of sense of like, who am I seeing myself in here compared to something like A New Hope? You're like, yeah, of course I'm Luke Skywalker and I'm going to blow up the Death Star and I'm the special one here, you know, me. And that's not the story of Rogue One, right? But also, with all our reviews on Andor Season 2, it's like, well, there isn't one hero. There isn't one chosen one. There's this like band of heroes. And that's exactly Rogue One as well. You know, you've got, say not relating to characters, maybe not Jyn or Cassian Andor so much, but like Baze Malbez and Chirrut Imwe. I really love their sort of bromance, right? They're probably my favorite characters in Rogue One. And we talked about how not all the heroes got like heroes' deaths in Andor, the series, but in Rogue One, everybody kind of gets a hero's death, and Baze and Chirrut always gets me. So maybe not relating to like Jyn and Andor being the heroes and like connecting with them, but some of the other ancillary characters, maybe even like Bodhi, because he's just got like, he's in it like all alone and he's kind of struggling to get people on his side. Like I almost kind of like Bodhi more than Andor or Jyn. Those two characters are like kind of insufferable. Like Luke is at least like, I believe in Luke as a sort of like happy-go-lucky kid, and Andor's beaten down and Jin's kind of beaten down. They're not as, like you said, I'm not connecting with them on that classic Star Wars hero's journey as much. But also, with seeing Andor's backstory, now you can kind of read into it. But this is another disconnect for me. Andor is so lived in. Playing the character of Andor on the Andor show, the portrayal is just, you're talking about filling in the somehow, like Andor the character is a better character in the series than he is in Rogue One. You get to Rogue One and you're like, what happened to all that epic journey you just had? Like, obviously, he didn't have all that in mind when he's playing the character for the movie, you know? So that kind of feels a little less meaty in Rogue One. You're like, what about Bix and like everyone you lost and everything you're leaving behind? Like, it's there, but you feel it much more powerfully in Andor, which is great. But then it's a little less like lived in by the time you get to Rogue One. It's a little more kind of surface level of a portrayal. I wouldn't say it's bad, but it is made better by the context of Andor, but you have to kind of like headcanon connect that. I don't know. Is that making any sense?
It is making sense. I know exactly how you feel. And it's up to us to make that connection, right? Because they made Rogue One without having Andor. And Rogue One was a mess, right? It was a mess, and Tony Gilroy came in late, but Andor is only Tony Gilroy's. And it's also like, what can you work with in retrospect? I think it's difficult for us to connect the version of Andor from the TV to the version of Andor in the movie.
Yeah.
I think we have blockers up.
You said this about Bale, you know, the two different actors portraying, and you're like, I know it's the same, and I have to like overlook that. Maybe that's kind of similar here.
I think it is similar, and I think we're getting caught up in that because of our relationship with Rogue One. I would be interested, again, anyone watching or listening, if you loved Rogue One when it came out, do you feel this way, or do you feel that that's a natural transition from Cassian in Andor to Cassian in Rogue One? But I do think that the character of Cassian in Rogue One changed a lot for me, even with maybe feeling like I'm a little bit held back just because of my original reaction to Rogue One. But having Andor, some of the stuff makes so much sense. Part of the reason why I didn't like Rogue One was because of that first scene with Cassian. I never liked that first scene. It set me up to dislike the whole movie, or to have a guard up for the whole movie. The first thing we see like the main character do is shoot Tivik because he can't climb up the wall. That was like hashtag not my Star Wars, right? It's not what I wanted to see. I don't know who the heroes are. Is this a good guy or a bad guy? He shot a stormtrooper, good. He shot his friend, bad. Classic Royce phrase, who do I root for here? Now it's 2025, and I understand that this stuff is way more complex. And also seeing what Andor went through and seeing who he became and who he had to become because of the show, that scene hits different. I'm different, but also the scene hits different because I watched Andor. So right off the bat, the movie is better for me because I always, honestly, I'll use it. I always hated that scene. Having it set up the way it was in Andor changes my connection, brings me a little bit more on board with all of this stuff. When Andor shoots Tivik, again, changed that scene for me. When they get to Jeddah and Cassian is like, we gotta hurry, this place is about to blow. He's a year off Gorman, and he lived through that. And we saw him live through that and the toll that it took on him. And so he's like, I could feel it in the air. It's electrically charged. I can't go through this again. We got to get out of here. He trusts Jyn. When I first watched it and he lets Jyn keep the blaster, I'm on K2SO's side. I'm like, do you want to hear the odds of her using it against you? It's high. It's really high. But he collects people and he judges their character, and he's a good judge of character because that's who he is. That's his superpower. And he lets her keep the blaster, and he doesn't shoot Galen. And all of the things that I had a problem with, I shouldn't say I had a problem with, but me personally had a problem with that didn't connect me to the movie, change for the better because of Andor.
Yeah. The shooting Galen thing and the way that falls out with Jyn, there's some odd stuff there, but I did really love his line, I don't have to explain it to you. And that tied in with Andor really does hit. Because if you're watching the movie, you're like, well, you were pulling a fast one and you're literally lying to her right now. Those were your orders. And then he fesses up to it. And there's a lot of good stuff there of like, suddenly the rebellion's real for you. It's been real for me the whole time. And I don't have to explain it to you. But if you watch Andor, it will be explained to you. So that is nice there. And you can give him the respect he deserves. We were talking about Luthen, like not getting respect on Yavin in the finale. Like as a viewer there, or just like a third party, like if you were in the universe, you're like, yeah, you can give Andor a pass because he's seen some stuff. Although he did say he was never in a cage like this one. And that was clearly, again, like him lying to Chirrut. Like, I've never been, like, dude, you were in one of the most insane prisons and you broke everybody out of it. Are you kidding?
Yeah.
This is a first for me. Okay, so we have to write that one off.
There's so much. The other issue with me not having a connection to the characters is that when Jin says something like, you might as well be a stormtrooper, to Cassian, just kind of, rolled right off. Now, when she says that, I'm like, I will fight you. I will die for this man. Like, we saw what he went through. We saw everything that happened to him. We know that Bix is out there somewhere. We know what he sacrificed. He's done all of this for a sunrise that he potentially will never see. And you don't know what he's sacrificed and what he's lost. And to say, oh, you might as well be a stormtrooper. That line hits the hardest in the whole movie for me because of what we've seen on Andor. I think the movie is made better. My synopsis, the movie is made better by the show. What I think has happened, though, is that I like Jin less than I did. It's made me like Cassian more, but it's made me like Jin less. Oh, I've never had the opportunity to have political opinions or whatever. You might as well be a stormtrooper. Just like the idea that she understands what these other people in the movie have been through and have gone through. And that's the way that I read her saying those things, is that she's presuming to know all of this about other people. And that's a character flaw for me.
Well, Andor's sizing it up too. He's like, you're in shock. You're looking for somewhere to put your grief. And that's all understandable too. This almost makes the case for a Jyn Erso prequel of things, right? If you want to talk about filling in the somehow, it's a shame that she wasn't with Saw for 16 years or whatever. Is that what they say in Rogue One? So she couldn't have even shown up in Andor with Saw, but there could be something cool there of what happened, what was her relationship, and we had Andor the show, not Jyn Erso the show, but I wonder if that 16-year timeline precluded her from being in the Andor series, right? And if there was something more there that we could have kind of fleshed out. And even when they rally the troops at the end, man, we got to get some positives for Rogue One, but when they rally the troops at the end, Jin's giving the speech of the troops aren't stoked for the mission is sort of how they're playing the scene, but they all volunteered to go, and maybe they know it's a suicide mission, maybe not, but she's giving the rallying speech of they don't know we're coming, so that gives us an advantage. And then Cassian gives a couple extra lines there. They're both kind of giving the hype speech. If this was the real Andor finale, it's Andor should be giving the speech. It's interesting how that kind of shapes up. If they're both sort of the hero, but not one is really leading over the other, and they're both kind of curmudgeons.
He's teaching her how to be a rebel, right? We've spent the entire movie with him teaching her how to be a rebel, and that's the climax of that, which I really like. And again, I think that is made better by the show. She was already with Saw, though. That's what I mean. I wonder. Well, but then she left, right? She was with Saw, but she hasn't seen him in 15 years. Also, he's not someone to look up to. She had a father who left to work for the Empire. She had Saw, who's we've said, he's more of a pirate, insurrectionist, kook. I don't know how else to describe him. So no real one to look up to until Cassian, and he brings her in and he trusts her and he's fighting for the rebellion and he's teaching her about the rebellion, and sometimes she pushes back because he was supposed to take out her father, but then he shows her what it means to be a rebel, which he's done for all of these other people. And I think that's why everyone volunteers for the mission at the end, because they know Cassian. And that's not a read that I would have been able to make without having Andor behind us. Melshi, all of them have his back because he's Cassian Andor, and they know him and they trust him, and he's their leader. Luthen set him up to be the leader, and now he's their leader. And so the little back and forth between them, I kind of like a lot more than I used to, with them amping up the troops at the end. Yeah. Yeah, I'll rewatch that again and give it another pass. I do like where she's saying, we'll keep going until the chances are spent. We'll take the next risk and the next risk. And that also ties in with Andor, with him being my luck is running out, So I don't know if there's a parallel there, but that's obviously some nice poetry in my headcanon. All right, here's the flowers. The last 55 minutes of the movie are incredible, right? So one thing I noted was the pacing and the format of Rogue One. Maybe some of this is due to the reshoots and the rewriting. It starts off
very odd in the way it jumps around from place to place and characters to characters. That's what I didn't like the second time I saw it in theaters. Because I was like, now I'm reading like where we are and realizing what's going on. And it's odd that we're jumping around, and even the timing that we're jumping around. But that's also kind of what, I don't remember about season 1 so much, but season 2 of Andor, when that started, we did a ton of jumping around and a ton of cutting, and crazy things are happening here and here and here, right? And people are rising up all over the galaxy. And maybe that's also intentional to get us kind of uncomfortable as we were in Andor, maybe also in Rogue One. And we're building so much suspense through it. And the stakes keep raising and raising, right? We got to get the plans, or we're trying to find where the plans are. And now this planet's being blown up. And then we go to the base, and the base is being blown up. And I lost my dad. And now we have to convince the council to go along with the mission. They keep raising the stakes so much through Rogue One. And that's something that every Andor arc did as well. You know, it starts off exciting, and then we slowly build up the pressure, and it explodes the last episode kind of every arc stereotypically. So I was really interested to see that, like, oh, that's what they did with Rogue One. I don't know if that's Gareth Edwards or if that's Tony Gilroy or whatever, but that's kind of a similar format there. And so that kind of worked for me. And that final battle on Scarif is just incredible. Like, there's no notes on that, other than I would love to see the scene where Jyn has to like shoot the TIE fighter. But watching that this last time around, there's a TIE that shoots. I didn't notice this, but one of the TIE fighters shoots the platform where she's realigning the antenna. And that's that same moment where like the other scene that doesn't exist in the real movie that was in the trailer. So I was wondering like if the same thing happened, but they just changed the angle of the shot. Someone needs to reveal all those secrets someday. But man, I love that Scarif battle is great. I love how you're in an X-Wing and then we pan down and now you're on the beach and it's like one continuous shot. There's so much there that is excellent filmography and maybe not necessarily like excellent Star Wars, but like, you know, I like Black Hawk Down and other, you know, war films, and that is perfect for that. Like, this is just entertaining war scene, Star Wars. Here we are. There's just blasters and X-Wings instead of Black Hawks and, you know, AR-17s or whatever.
So the Battle of Scarif was always great, like you're saying. I mean, again, it's just beautiful. It looks really good, right? That was one part of Rogue that's always been true of Rogue One, that Scarif looks amazing. All of it looks great. The saddest part of Rogue One for me always was K2SO's death. Now we've had, you know, Climb and of course Nemec's last words as well. And now we have more context for K2 and they've built their relationship and Melshi. And so it also adds a lot to what we lose. And of course, like the end scene with Cassian and Jyn on the beach. I mean, that's where we're going. That's what we're getting to, right? That is the scene. If we're talking about the changes, the way we're viewing what's changed in the way we watch Rogue One, that's the climax of the conversation. Did we feel stuff before? What do we feel now? And it was always sad. The characters, they're beaten, they're broken, but they've done the thing. They've done the hero work. They're on the beach. They embrace, and it ends. And that was always sad, because it's sad when characters die. There's got to be a supercut out there of like a flashback moment in Cassian's eyes in that scene of everything we've gone through with the character now. That's what I see. And that's the beauty of that moment now. It was sad. Now it's heartbreaking. Now it's debilitatingly devastating because we know what he's done. We, the audience, are so much more connected with the character, and we've been with him through everything, but we also know what he's losing in that moment. And never have I ever wanted something to be retconned so badly. Like, I would have no issue if they retconned this entire thing and Cassian went off on his own at the end of Andor and found Bix. We know that all of that is left behind. We know that Vel will probably, you know, in my headcanon, Vel knows that Bix has a kid. She's going to get the news that Cassian was killed on Scarif and maybe have to deliver that, whatever. Yeah. All of that is all wrapped up in that last scene. So that's what seals it for me. That's what makes Rogue One better for me now than it was then. We've had the history, we have the somehow, but that moment is so much more precious now than it's ever been for me.
Yeah. I really appreciate that note about Vel. Like, we theorized, like, right after recording last episode, we were like, oh, does Vel know? And you're right. Like, so she's got to go to Minarao, you know, and deliver the news. That's hard. Man, this is another thing of like, Andor is hard to watch. It's uncomfortable. Rogue One is hard to watch. It's uncomfortable. Like, doesn't make me feel good. Like, the end of, you know, A New Hope, I feel good. The end of Force Awakens, I feel pretty good. You're like, wow, I'm excited. I'm amped up. Like, let's train to be a Jedi. This is great. And I don't get amped up at the end of Rogue One, or at least that particular scene doesn't get me really like amped up in a positive way. But I'm with you. It's powerful. The overall theme, it's not just Andor, and it's not just Jyn there. Yes, we're in this conversation, we're talking about how Andor is kind of changing Rogue One. It's interesting to do the reflection there of like, what's the highlight reel montage that we could supercut in. That would be really interesting. I'd love to see those YouTube videos. But for me, it's not just that. It's like, it's all the other heroes that still ties in, I think, with Andor. Like, the theme of that is just the sacrifice of every single person there. Bodhi plugs in the antenna and he's like, oh, we'll get the signal up. Boom. His ship blows up. Like, fulfills his destiny, right? Chirrut turns on the master switch. Same thing. Fulfills his destiny, blows up. Baze, unfortunately, I guess he doesn't really go out kind of in a blaze of glory, but he takes down a couple of the Death Troopers on the way out, you know? And dude, I would rather just talk about Baze and Chirrut for an hour, because they're my favorites from Rogue One. I love, like, he says, look for the Force and you'll always find me. Like, man, Joey, if one of us is dying in the other's arms, like, that's the way to go, dude.
It's got to be our last line.
Dude, it has to be. And because they set it up that, like, Baze was the most devoted of us all, and he's like not anymore for whatever reason, and then he's there and he's. So I'm gushing over that bromance there, but all of those characters made the sacrifice. You know, even the X-Wing pilot guy, Merrick or whatever, you know, he goes down. Melshi, everybody else, like every single character, I guess not every, most of the characters in Andor and Rogue One make the ultimate sacrifice, and it is heavy there. And that's really what I appreciate about it, but it makes it tough. It's more of a somber, like, pride in the galaxy, rather than a like, yes, we got him, you know? It just gives you the hope with Leia at the end. It's funny, like, I have to watch it again now, because I wasn't seeing Andor and Jyn embracing and wondering what he was thinking there. I was thinking about the luck aspect. Like, this is what it led to. This was your moment of, like, fulfilling your destiny thing. You brought it here, and, like, your best was enough. This is what you had to do. And that was it. Now it's up to somebody else. But yeah, I wonder if he's thinking about Bix in that moment, you know? Or whoever. Marva, E2 Emo.
Yeah, you're right. All the heroes that we've lost up until then, I have to believe that he's thinking about Bix. This goes back into our conversation about, like, is Rogue One the end? As you're saying, it might not amp you up. My point last week was that I personally don't need it to be that. I can sit with the way that it is. I'm at a point where, like, I don't need this stuff to, like, rally me into the streets. It filled me with enough of a fire based on what they were doing. But you can just let Rogue One roll right into A New Hope and then let that roll on until we do get the happy end. I mean, I guess A New Hope does have a happy ending, but even going further, let it ride all the way through to the end of Return of the Jedi, and there you have your happy ending.
Yeah.
They're amped up. They beat the bad guy. That's what I mean. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, all of this stuff, like Andor, the show, not only made Rogue One, a movie that I didn't really like, better for me, but I think that it also uplifts the original trilogy, which we both love. But now when I get to the end, when I get to the destruction of Death Star 2 and the Battle of Endor, I will be thinking about what was sacrificed along the way, and having the weight of Andor in that moment will make that victory so much more meaningful.
Yeah. Dude, you know, we've made the album analogy with, like, individual episodes in a series where we're like, well, this one was a little bit of a detour. And it's like, well, it's part of the story. And it's like, yeah, Andor is like an album track, you know? Rogue One is an album track. And it's like, those are the sad, slow songs in the middle of, like, the bangers, right? So that's a really interesting way to look at that, of, like, it's not just this one-off moment that you're like, is this good or is this bad? Does it work or not? Because you have to take it in context. So we just kind of watched it in order, right? Andor to Rogue One, and we're theorizing into A New Hope. I haven't done that myself, but this begs the question, what now is the proper viewing order? And just like you're saying, like if there's no true finale, does the order matter? Does it not matter? You can watch it chronologically, Andor, Rogue One, A New Hope. You can watch it release order, A New Hope, which is opposite chronological, A New Hope, Rogue One, and then Andor, or a machete order, A New Hope, Andor, Rogue One. Do you have a thought on that? Because like initially my thought was like in order makes sense because they're perfectly buttressed to each other. But I think you do have a different experience depending on which way you wanted to watch that in, especially if you haven't seen it before, obviously. Even just like on the like literary level of just kind of analyzing it, that still changes your perspective. Like going from Andor to Rogue One, you're like, well, Andor isn't quite as lived in. The character's portrayal is different, but that could change, if you watch it in reverse order, right? So what do you think about that? Is this interesting or not? Are we going to cut this section?
Classic podcast move. Is this a thing? Yeah, I think I would watch like halfway through A New Hope, right? When they're talking about getting the Death Star plans and showing off the Death Star plans, and then stop and then go back and watch Andor and Rogue One. I kind of love these conversations. I love like the aspect of like the machete order and what order do you watch stuff in and what can you stop and go backwards in time to get more context. I love that. And I love that this sets that up. Like that again, like the filling in the somehow allows for that. So it would be fun just to try these out. And I'm never going to get sick of watching Star Wars. Rogue One, even though I didn't appreciate it when it came out in 2016, but then really appreciated it, the Andor show, basically Rogue One walked or ran, depending on how you felt about it, but it walked so that Andor could run. And I think that that's the most important thing. We wouldn't have Tony Gilroy's version of, remember, like when the show was pitched, it was a buddy cop, Cassian K2SO, traveler out in the galaxy idea that Tony Gilroy pushed back on. So without Rogue One, we would not have Tony Gilroy's version of Andor, and I think that that's the most important thing.
All right, listeners, so we would love to keep this conversation going. Head down to the comments. Let us know what you thought about Andor Season 2, leading into Rogue One, leading into A New Hope, and so on and so forth. And Bob's your uncle, and make sure to subscribe and tune in next time for more nerdy pop culture, but mostly Star Wars. Thanks for listening to the show today. I've been Royce.
I've been the Boar Gullet.
And we've been Krypton,
Krypton to
Alderaan.
Jeddah.
Krypton to Alderaan. Krypton to Alderaan.
I really like Jeddah. It's so cool. It's like, that's also a big bummer that it gets blown up.
Yeah.
Because it's a cool place.
We didn't get enough Jeddah